So ladies and gentlemen, well, what a great tech talk that was to start off our wonderful event. I'd also request the audience to please use the Q&A tab to post your questions during the session. It'll be picked up and answered at the end of the session if time allows. Well, right now we're on our government panel discussion on future of cybersecurity for governments, challenges, best practices, and effective strategies to create a cyber-safe society. We're looking at talking about the three pillars of government cybersecurity strategy, which is securing federal networks, protecting critical infrastructure, providing cyber governance. We're also looking at talking about how to effectively build strong capabilities for detection, response, and recovery. Intergovernment cyber defense collaboration, wherein we're looking at talking about creating cyber resilient community, and a two-author authentication encryption of sensitive data and other effective mechanisms of cybersecurity for governments. Well, we're elated to be joined by our eminent panelists. First up, Chung Kwan, who is known as Alex, Senior Manager, Cybersecurity, Milaha, Qatar. Well, Alex has over 20 years of experience in IT strategy, digital transformation, program delivery, and cybersecurity across ONG, maritime, and logistics industry. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us. With this, I'd request you to switch on your camera and join us on the main stage.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure is all ours. Also joining us now on the stage and screen is Mounir Kamal, Cybersecurity Advisor, Incident Handling and Digital Forensics Manager, Q-CERT, Qatar. Well, Mounir has been involved within the information security field for the last 20 plus years. He's also a senior information security risk management professional with a solid technical background and a highly analytical mind. Thank you so much, Mounir, for joining us today live at the show. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Happy to be with you today.
Pleasure having you. Also, we are joining now on the stage and screen is Hafiz Farooq, the cybersecurity data architect, Saudi Aramco. With 16 years of research and professional experience in cyber and network security domain, Hafiz is harnessing the first line of defense against a huge spectrum of targeted and untargeted cyber attacks from the adversaries. Thank you so much, Hafiz, for joining us today.
Yeah, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And I really appreciate inviting us for such a nice talk today.
Absolutely, the pleasure is all ours. Also joining us is Noel van der Colin, cyber lead at the Security Institute of Governance and Leadership, Stellenbosch University, South Africa. Well, her work is something which cuts across both the public and the private sectors and has a strong focus of governance, risk, and compliance issues in information security. She's somebody who has extensive experience in cyber strategy and cyber warfare. Thank you so much, Noel, for joining us today.
Good morning, Kwan. Thank you. It's lovely to be with everyone.
Pleasure is all ours. Also, we're joined now on the stage and screen by Oscar Danisman, the Director of Sales Engineering, Emerging Markets, Forcepoint UAE. With over 20 years of experience in ICT, Danisman has extensive background in information security, IT auditing, monitoring, security governance, and consulting and business development. Thank you so much, Oscar, for joining us today.
Thanks, Bhavna. It's a pleasure to be in the esteemed panel today. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And now it is time to introduce to you the moderator of this wonderful panel discussion, Nazreen Ibrahim, CEO, founder, NAS Consulting International, South Africa. Well, Nazreen has an extensive broadcast portfolio presenting and producing on both television and radio. She's currently developing a continental team to secure dedicated research on AI ethics within the African continent. Thank you so much, Nazreen, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to have this panel discussion. We've got some strong and solid esteemed panelists on board.
Absolutely. So Nazreen, with this, I'd leave the stage and screen to you and your entire panel to take it forth. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Bhavna, and thanks to the team at World Cybersecurity Summit. I'm excited. I spoke with our panelists yesterday, and for those tuned in, I think if you're thinking about cybersecurity for governments, you have many questions, and some of those we're going to ask our panelists today. So you've heard an intro from our lovely host, Bhavna, to all our panelists, Oz, Mounir, Noel, Hafiz, Alex. There are a few questions that I'd like to ask, but this is how we will start for today. Our theme is Future of Cybersecurity for Governments. And two of the main points that we'd like to discover are creating a cyber resilient community and government data security. Now, while those are rather large topics, we can break them down to look at a few areas that affect us all today. But before we do that, it's always nice to get a sense of who's speaking to you when you're tuning in. So I would like to welcome all the panelists first, and I'd like to ask every one of you, and we'll start with you, Oz. I would like to ask you to introduce yourself in the following manner: a brief intro of what your professional area of focus is in everyday work, one word to describe yourself. Let's go for it.
Thank you, Nazreen. It's a pleasure to be in the panel. Basically, I'm working at ForcePoint. I'm managing today around 100 plus countries, the emerging markets we call, all the way from Russia, CIS to Africa and Gulf and Middle East. And in my current capability, basically, I'm really happy to help the global governments of the world and the big enterprise customers in helping their, in securing their data and protecting their intellectual properties and the critical infrastructures, basically.
One word to describe yourself.
Well, I would say growth mindset. So I always like to learn new things, and I'm sure that I will learn a lot from the esteemed panelists today.
Okay, I like that. So broad-minded, if I got that correct. Noel, we'll go on to you. Describe your everyday work briefly, and then one word to describe yourself, please.
Thanks, Nazim. Well, in my everyday work, I actually I lecture students at the University of Stellenbosch, and in matters of cyber strategy. And then, of course, I work at Sigler as the cyber program lead. And our work there is significantly Africa focused, building cybersecurity capacity in Africa, particularly across governmental level. But then on a more international level, a lot of the work that I'm doing now is within financial systems in Africa, cybersecurity and cyber risk, but also for the International Committee of the Red Cross, our strong focus on protecting civilians from cyber harm. You know, I think there's significant work to do there as we see big, large-scale international cyber attacks increasing. So those are some of my focus areas.
And your one word, Noel.
I think I'm resourceful. I think if you live in Africa, you have to learn to make do with less, but you also need to be able to adapt very quickly to changing circumstances. So yeah, I think that's where I would go.
I like that word. It's one of my favorites. Thank you so much. Mounir, over to you.
My name is Mounir Kamal. I'm working in the area of information security since 2000. So it's 21 years now. The last 14 years working for Qatar CERT. And during the working of Qatar CERT, I passed through many areas of information security. My word is passionate, because during the last 20 years, I love information security and passed through many areas. So the passionate is the right word for myself in information security.
Okay, excellent. I love this, passionate. So Oz, broad-minded, Noel, resourceful, Mounir is passionate. Alex and Hafiz, we're going to get your words. So by the time we end the session and we've gone through how governments actually face understanding cybersecurity strategies, these are possibly the words that we'd most likely use to describe how effective they are. This is where we want to get to. Alex, over to you.
Hi, my full name is Chung Kwan San, but I'm better known as Alex in my working career.
What would you prefer me to call you?
Alex is fine. I just wanted to make it clear that my full name is that. I'm leading cybersecurity function for Milaha. Cybersecurity function was basically started from scratch when I joined Milaha. At a very basic level until today, I think we are on a good path to maturity. So I'm leading the department. So basically, I look after all aspects of cybersecurity for the company. And finally, one word to describe myself. the word that comes straight into my mind is thinker. I think I always sort of relate when, you know, what I see, what I hear from the news, from friends, from discussion in forum like this, always try to relate to how can I make use of those information to do a better job when come to protecting the data or information in my area. So I would like to see that I'm more a thinker. Thank you.
So, thank you so much. You can continue. And I was saying yes to Oz. He said growth-minded, not broad-minded. So yes, this is okay. But please continue and wrap up, and I'll move over to Hafiz.
That's sums up all, I think. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much for that. So we've got you down as thinker. Hafiz, finally, as we wrap up the first section of introductions, what does your day-to-day work look like, and one word to describe yourself?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. And my name is Hafiz Farouk, and I have 16 years of cybersecurity experience. Now I'm working for Saudi Aramco since last 7 years. And my day-to-day work is actually looking after the defensive operations for Saudi Aramco upstream business line. And our responsibility is to make sure that the most critical and one of the largest critical infrastructure in the world is energy infrastructure is fully secure. If you want me to describe myself in one word, I would say myself, I'm a COVID-19 for cyber attackers.
COVID-19 for cyber attacks. Well, I don't think you obviously, there's no vaccine for that one there. We'll just go with that thinking there. So, which is brilliant, because this is what we want to explore today, not withstanding the fact that actual COVID-19 has had impact, very devastating impact on all of us. So for everyone tuning in and for everyone in the panel, I hope you and your families are well. But let's get into the discussion. And one word to describe myself before we go on, I would say I am courageous. And that would be my word as we end off today's discussion when we do. Panelists, you're all from varied backgrounds, but with a focus on researching or implementing the cybersecurity ecosystems that protect governments and impact citizens. Let's begin with introductory remarks about your professional perspective on what a government's cybersecurity strategy should look like in a post-pandemic world. And Hafiz, we ended with you and we'll begin with you once again. So please, let us know.
Thanks for such a great question. And when you talk about national cybersecurity strategy, I would say that national cybersecurity strategy is a prime responsibility for any government. And it's their responsibility to make sure that all people within the country are safe, the businesses are up and running, and the social way of life is fully secure. So that's why having an effective, first of all, national cybersecurity strategy is a main tool which nowadays every country should have. And when we talk about in details about the national cybersecurity strategy, I want to highlight here 3 important areas, I would say. One of the important area, obviously, everybody knows that this is the integration. Whatever strategy you build, it should be integrated, making sure that all the government tentacles, ministries, all the key organizations within your country are fully on board on that strategy. All the policies they understand in line with the strategy. And this is how we should move forward. So collaboration and integration is, I think, is the first key important in your mind whenever you build a national cybersecurity strategy. Second important point I want to highlight is the defense. But when we talk about defensive strategy at a national level, I will add something to it, which is intelligence-driven defense. So if you are just running a small company level strategy, or you can say a policy, you can have a basic defensive operation. But when you talk about a national cybersecurity strategy, you will have to add a feature of intelligence because of the nowadays nation state actors coming into action, APTs, targeted attacks, sponsored attacks against your key businesses. So you will have to make sure that the intelligence, threat intelligence, darknet intelligence, dark web intelligence, all these tentacles I'm talking about, they are fully covered into the strategy. So whatever you build in terms of defensive operation, that should be fully in line with the intelligence. It is very important because your businesses, they don't have the capability to run a massive intelligence operation. So it's your responsibility at a government level that you keep your important government organizations, small businesses, everybody on board, and keep them fully informed about the latest threats they are going to face. And last and but not the least is the critical infrastructure. Whenever you build a national level cybersecurity strategy, you need to make sure that you keep your critical infrastructure in mind. It's a government responsibility that the critical infrastructure should be fully secured. Sometimes the organization and the companies in your country, they don't have the capability, they don't have the capacity to fully secure their infrastructure. So it's a government responsibility while making the strategy that their strategy should be in line with the requirement to address the cybersecurity requirement of all these critical infrastructures. So these are three important points. Yep. Yeah, these are the important points in the mind.
To wrap up what you were saying, intelligence-driven defense, integration, and critical infrastructure. I think that's what I took away from your first answer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I want to throw it over to Mounir, who I know is next up. This is Hafiz's approach to it. What is your approach from a background of being in a regional approach?
Basically, the process of securing a government, or the effort required for government to secure a nation, is to first define the national critical function. Every country has a specific critical functions that keep people alive, people in practice as an organization. And then there is somehow a high level risk assessment, or we can call it national risk assessment, of how to use a risk and the opportunity of the fast changes of technologies. This is very important part to start drawing the basic strategy for any countries. There is it's something like a gearbox. This gearbox have a different size. The larger size is the high level risk, and then security regulations and the governance, and detailed risk. This is the first layer. When we speak about detailed risk, it should support it with the threat intelligence, like what Hafiz said. Then this is process, it should be go very on annual basis. And why we informed about the use opportunity of technology, because there is a new technology can reduce a lot of cybersecurity risk against the governments. And we should use this as an opportunity, not as a risk. It is very famous for us as security professionals. We are very good to deny it, to evaluate the threats, but evaluate the opportunity and use the opportunity to enhance the national cybersecurity is very important point regarding it to the emerging technology, like the 5G, the clouds, IoT, the artificial intelligence. And the next gear will come a very focus on how you study the threat, vulnerability, assets in your government, and how you conduct a detailed risk assessment method, and how we can adapt the conclusion of this into how the defense strategy will follow from security architecture and security operations. And then it comes to the last not least, the one who take care about the operations on daily levels. So I pass through all of these gears and reach to the daily level of how I can create somehow strategy to deliver a very close threat monitoring, and how to deliver the daily vulnerability monitoring for the systems in the governance. All of these cycles, if one is stopped, the glitch will come. All the cycles should take input, output from the others. Without these ecosystems, I think there will be somehow unbalance in the equation.
Mounir, thank you so much for that. So what I took away from that were the two main areas were risk assessment and having standard operating procedures that really have impact on making sure the system works. Oz, how would you respond?
Yes, actually, I will take from where Mounir left, and he mentioned the technology side of the things. And being, I mean, I think I'm the only one who is representing a cybersecurity vendor in this panel today. I think technology has a very important, definitely help to all our efforts to make sure that the society, the governments, and actually the world is secure. And as Force Point, what we're doing is we are basically putting the people in the core of our solutions. It's like, despite you might be thinking that everyone will come up with some, next-gen firewalls, this and that. Yes, that's definitely, those solutions you needed. But end of the day, if you're not putting the people in the core, and you're understanding the way, the context that they are interacting with your data, and you don't have an idea about how that interaction is, whether this is a benign thing or it's a malicious activity, you cannot really differentiate when a nation state, like Hafiz was saying, actually is impersonating one of your people and trying to steal your data. So basically, as Force Point, what we try to do is we try to help our customers to understand this context. So understand the behavior of the people utilizing their systems, and then put the defenses. So then these defenses will become like an intelligent enforcement point for you, and take a lot of resources that you might be needing to secure in all these different multitude of government entities, and basically provide some relief to the operations, day-to-day operations that Mounir was also saying. And the other part is actually, I would like to tell, again, taking from Hafiz, the critical infrastructure. This is extremely, extremely important. And the typical legacy approach for that have been always to put an air gap and thinking that, with the air gap that you're totally isolated from internet and you'll be secure. But guess what? Still, we are seeing this big pipeline issue that happened in the US, right? It caused a havoc in their whole state, and people were suffering during this pandemic without oil. So you need to have necessary cross-domain solutions as well to make sure that whatever is, digital content going to these critical infrastructures are fully sanitized. And, again, the legacy like sandboxing and technologies have seen not to be effective enough. So you need to really think out of the box, and you need to think about, how to make sure that you literally, remove all the dynamic content and reassemble things and then reuse in this critical infrastructure, so that that everything that comes into this critical network, which is very sensitive, is having the topmost hygiene.
Thank you so much, Oz. The main point I got away from you was people at the core of the solution, because AI learns, and it learns on its own, but it learns from something, and it learns from someone. So it's very, very interesting that you say that there's such a focus on people, because that's exactly what needs to happen. Noel, how would you respond to that, being in the South African context?
Thanks, Nazim. I think, firstly, that whether it's South Africa or anywhere else, I think the way that traditionally governments have approached perhaps government cybersecurity has been a bit restrictive, in the sense that we tend to see cybersecurity as a national security problem instead of a national problem or a national challenge. And by that, I mean, you cannot actually separate governments from your actual business infrastructure, your entire cybersecurity ecosystem. At the end of the day, this is one complex ecosystem with a lot of flows of interdependencies going back and forth, whether it's federal government, or subnational governments, or businesses mixed in. So a lot of what when you look at what would present itself as a strategic target within your state, very often that's not a government target. That may be critical infrastructure, but it could constitute even digital critical infrastructure like your national payment system, which governments frequently have very little to actually do with. However, they've got the resources to help shore that up. So I think that's a very important thing. First of all, is we need to rethink this idea this is not new in cybersecurity. We all know we need better multi-stakeholder management. We need better public-private partnerships. So that's the first thing, that we really need to get to that. And I think if you look at a state like Singapore or Sweden, where they're adopting what they call this total defense model nationally, that includes building resilience in your population. And that, I think, is where we need to look at, because at the end of the day, your population is actually your soft underbelly. So, you know, it's as Susan Potgieter from the South African Banking Risk Institute says, the banks have spent a fortune on their cybersecurity, and South African banks actually have very good cybersecurity.
Yeah.
But the attackers are going in back through the user. So if we don't cover the full spectrum of everybody in our cyber ecosystems, we're going to remain incredibly exposed. So feeding in there from a user point of view. And I think it's understanding this, that we need to get all the relationships right and understand. And it comes back to that what Oz was talking about with air gapping. At the end of the day, there isn't really such a thing, because at some point data crosses over somewhere. The government and the commercial aspects of cyberspace, the artifacts, are shared.
Yeah.
We share a connected into physical and digital interdependency.
Thank you so much, Noel. I couldn't agree more. The concept around multi-stakeholder partnerships is key. It's as simple as you go to a building here in South Africa. We've experienced this many times. You're filling out a form to enter at security, and you've got to somehow put in your ID number. That's a very questioned it many times, and I refuse to put it down, but it's as simple as that. Alex, you're wrapping up this discussion. Please share your thoughts from everything your esteemed panelists have said.
Yeah, I think a lot has been covered, so I'm just going to jump straight to a few points that I'm taken note that I think is not being mentioned as yet, or maybe in some way. The first thing I want to say is that I think the government plays a very important role to ensure that there's steady pipeline of resources in cybersecurity. This is a global challenge. We all know that. I think this is one area that government can play a big help, play a big role and be a big help to promote these courses in the educational academic institution, so that more people are joining this line of profession, and this is going to solve, I think, the challenge for a lot of companies, and not just the government as well within that nation. The second thing I think would be to be a bit more transparent about what is happening in country and also out there. I'm sure government has a lot of information about this, and sometimes, most of the time, these incidents are classified. But this actually does, in my opinion, sometimes this does not help to create that transparency and provide enough information for the community that in needs of this information to build on their defense systems. I see that a lot of NGO type of organization or portal being set up to share this information. For example, there's one related to marine industry related cyber incidents. There's one portal for that, and that's run by an NGO. So I think government can play a role in this, and I'm sure that they would have been in better position to provide, information that are really validated, genuine, and suitable for the use of the community to help themselves. And one last thing I would like to say is about the cybersecurity awareness culture. Now, I'm a firm believer that educating and making your user aware is going to save you 50% of the effort. And I've gone through the effort trying to educate the user in my corporate environment. And I know how hard it is, because you always have a wide spectrum and you always have non-believer. And I think if the message coming from the government, it has much bigger impact than someone from me, like, only the leaders within a corporate environment. So therefore, I think government can also play this role to really promoting the cyber-aware culture and make the citizens and also the population within the nation equipped with a certain level of knowledge to help themselves to defend against cyber incident. I think that's basically the three other points I think I would like to mention in this forum. Thank you.
Alex, thank you so much. What I took away from that was that it's not just regulation that government should be focused on, it's actual building of a digital citizenry, a responsible digital citizenry, alongside other players in the spectrum. Fantastic. So we've had a really nice intro and a break into our discussion. I know we have limited time, and I know there are a lot of us on the panel. We have one question per panelist, and they all relate directly to what you work to daily. So I'm hoping that we can discuss it briefly, but here we go. So for Oz and Noel, I'd like to connect your backgrounds from both research into cybersecurity challenges and solutions with policy and strategic impact, as well as providing resiliency and zero trust security to governments. How would you rate the level of preparedness across leading economies and the developing world's governments with securing data and reducing the risk of vulnerability with cyber attacks? Oz, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think, Nazreen, the zero trust has been with us since 2009. I mean, if you look at, when this term initially came, and even basically what it means is, as the name implies, do not trust blindly, right? So always verify. And what I see is with the pandemic, actually, this has entered into our lives and the whole government landscape, even in a more critical, pace. And what we try to help to our governments and to in their maturity and in their readiness to be, fully able to perform in this, mindset and the framework, because zero trust is not a technology, it's a framework, if you ask me. Basically, you need to start with the data. And as Alex was saying, you need to, again, get your people involved in this process. And what you need to do is you need to have your people, because the employees, they know their data, they know what is critical. You need to start with understanding where your data is and give the, basically empower your people to help them classify this data. Definitely technology can help you there. And the technology can then double check if that classification was done properly or not, based on some, again, regulations. If for example, there is some PII data, some, Qatar ID, some, like critical personal information is kept, and then accordingly the technology can still adjust the classification. But the important thing is when you have the people involved, they will have this mindset of, oh, I'm doing something interesting and sensitive, and this data might be causing problem if I don't really transfer it properly, if I don't process it properly, if I maybe accidentally send to a third party, which I shouldn't be sending. So all this starts, to put this culture in your employees. So empower your people, understand where your data is, and then build risk adaptive technologies, again, that can help you. Basically, understand your people, typically, and an employee is always accessing to a certain folder, certain application. If this behavior changes, maybe he is impersonated by someone else. Maybe he starts to download like gigs of data, which he was not doing before, right? So technology can help you to understand that. And by increasing the risk level of that individual, then you can start applying, for example, more restricted policies, right? On the DLP technologies, for example, you will not let that person to communicate with the outside world, even if that matters. So the key here is implement zero trust strategies. Do not trust anyone blindly. There is nowhere anymore something like a secure network. People are not anymore in your, so-called, secure local area networks in your offices. They are connecting from anywhere, right? One day this thing changed. So we are all working from home still. And I'm hoping that we'll go back to the offices soon, maybe in September and things like that in the world. Maybe some parts, things are settling more, but this will stay with us. We'll continue to work remotely. A majority of our workforce will be working remotely, and we can never ever say that there's a trusted, place in the whole world, right? So everything should be zero trust, give access based on the need, but continuously monitor. That's the key.
Thank you so much. Also, it's creating a risk adaptive environment, but educating people about how to operate, because you can't restrict them too much. They need to be given some freedom. It reminds me of a recent story, an interesting article I read on Bloomberg about a young Microsoft tester allocated to hacking or doing tests, penetration testing on the Xbox codes, but managed, I think it was Xbox, if I'm not mistaken, managed to find a flaw, decided that when you bought them from the store, it actually recognized the code. It bypassed everything else, but he could exchange it for Bitcoin or some kind of cyber transactions, got all this money. Eventually, they caught up with him 2 years later, but there we go. So restrictive, risk adaptive environment. Noel, how would you respond to that? If you can unmute yourself, please. Phrase of our century,
Sorry,
my God.
sorry, Natalie.
It's okay.
I think if I go back to your question and relating to the developing world specifically, I would say it's and how are we doing? I would say in the first place, obviously that's quite a mixed bag depending on state to state. I think some states are doing very well, whereas others are displaying immense lag. So, it's not an easy question to answer in that sense. The first thing is, I think that governments, even in significantly underdeveloped states, need to understand that there's no such thing as cyber immunity. Everybody has some level of digital dependency. And again, this comes back to what we've been discussing, how important it is for your entire population to have some level of cyber resilience and for your workforces to have a level of cyber resilience. I think the challenge in the developing world is very often really coming back to the public-private partnerships, learning to leverage the immense expertise in the private sector. I think in big technology companies specifically, who have spent significant time, years, investing in cybersecurity know-how and skills. And I don't see a lot of that happening. There seems to be a lot of often, wanting to keep activities very quiet and all that sort of thing, a lot of mistrust. And we need to see a lot more of the confidence building kind of measures. And I think a lot more cooperation with big tech. It's that comment that governments can do a certain amount in cyberspace, but they can't bend cyberspace in the way that a big technology company really can. And you saw that when in Microsoft's response to the SolarWinds attack. So for me, it's a lot more about thinking a lot more broadly about reaching out and making use of the resources that actually are out there that you have access to. Our biggest challenge is our skills pipeline in the developing world, and very often the quicker we produce those skills, the more they snapped up in the developed world, simply because of the global shortage. So we're on a treadmill there. And our population cyber resilience, because we have younger populations in the developing world, the global south, and they're coming online quickly. So there we sort of, even at a basic education level, we really need to take the bull by the horns and get moving there. Within companies, I think that's probably ironically an area that probably is ahead of the rest of a lot of societies, because companies understand the financial risks and the reputational risks, and companies in the private sector are probably leading the way in the global south. They've been lagged by government and general population type of responses, I think.
Thank you so much. So cyber resilience, skills development, better skills development here, but it then takes me to the next point, I think, which I have from Mounir. And Mounir, as a cybersecurity advisor at Q-CERT, it's more, now I want to move into the more regional specific focus. As a cybersecurity advisor at Q-CERT, what are the elements of cybersecurity governance that are key priorities to ensure a stable and secure system for the region?
This is a huge, very wide questions to limited, but there is at least main 5 pillars here. Business, how business understands security, how business encourage a cybersecurity. Second is how in a region the regulations and cyber legislations and the policies. And this is the second pillar of evaluating the risk, ensuring compliance. And the third one is how to ensure your critical infrastructures have the proper cybersecurity architectures. And here we'll come to the defense. But before go to the defense, I should back again because defense is a levels and security control is a levels. And I can waste money for more than needed security solutions to protect my assets. And for these reasons, I have to jump into the threat intelligence and how the threat intelligence driven solution can help me to build a defensive security architectures. All of this is not yet come to the life status of entities within the region, how to secure it. It is the security operations, how I conduct incident management, how I conduct threat monitoring, how I improve and optimize this way based on the adversary capabilities collected by any nation or region. So I remember there was a very major incident in 2012, and it could impact consequently two major energy sectors with a 2-week differences. If you recognize similar things, you can enhance your defenses and enhance your cybersecurity architectures within the second vectors. And it comes to what Alex said about how creating information sharing platform for a region, for a common adversary targets this region or targets this country or target these sectors could help this to protect and create additional security control to protect their assets.
Mounir, thank you so much. A common thread we're hearing, people empowerment, people at the center of it. If you empower them, then they also have massive direct impact on whether our cybersecurity strategies for governments work or they don't, because Noel, I remember you saying they're the underbelly of any region or any space. Alex, finally, coming to you, or rather moving to you. I feel like we're still in the first session, but we're not. So let me ask you something that I was interested in. Earlier this year, Milaha signed a partnership contract with Mounir to ensure the protection of Milaha information infrastructure against cyber threats. Yeah. What does this type of partnership signify and demonstrate to other organizations in their quest for sharpened incident response capabilities and protection of business assets?
Yes, we spend basically we spend about close to 6 to 7 months effort to look for a long-term partner in cybersecurity journey. I'm from an end user environment, so I'm not from vendor environment. Our main business is maritime and shipping business. Coming from an end user environment, to really to upscale and run a fully functional cybersecurity department, you have to do a lot of change management. Obviously, you need to start with something and then move on from there, and you need to leverage. And all depends on which one is, let's say, a more pragmatic approach and more cost-effective approach to get to the goals that you want to achieve, so that your data, your crown jewels are protected, right? So in our case, we believe that for us to quickly achieve, let's say, to leap and bound in the journey of cybersecurity, we need to leverage the expertise of specialized company in the cybersecurity defense. So we have very limited in-house resources that we will focus these resources into GRC, which is standing for governance, risk and compliance. And at the same time, for the technical capabilities, like Security Operations Center, or better known as SOC, like incident response, like let's say vulnerability and threat hunting. These are the technical capabilities that we have decided to outsource to a partner in a longer run. So therefore, we have appointed and established this partnership with Malumatia, and basically over just about 3 months' time, we have fully onboarded these capabilities. So now Milaha has a much more balanced and matured cybersecurity governance and also cybersecurity posture, so that we are able to get to the, let's say, to maturity in a much faster way. Of course, this strategy will work today. It will work perhaps for the next 2 years. And in a longer run, when the threat landscape evolve, when the businesses also evolve with different priorities, we will have to revisit this and to see what is the best way to do things at that time.
Alex, thank you so much. What I'm hearing you say is that if you have limited resources in your organization, or as a government, you're looking at it, better to get, because of this skills shortage we're understanding globally as well, better to get the experts, bring them in, focus on one key concept like you've done with GRC, and then you're able to build out then a more stable approach, right?
Yeah, and also one keyword is the skill of economy. So
Skill of economy, got you.
Yeah, if you set up a SOC center yourself, you need to have at least 7 people full-time to run 24 hours, 24/7 SOC. And in the case of if your size of an organization is only couple of hundred employees, that investment may not be maybe too much for your management to take that. At the same time, you outsource that to a specialized company where you can build a trust with. That will give you the advantages of cost effectiveness. At the same time, you are able to onboard that capability in a very swift way.
Thank you so much, Alex. So, Hafiz, you've been waiting a long time. We have 6 minutes, I've been told by our organizers. Team extended your panel since the audience seems to be loving this panel. Guys, way to go. We are doing well. So, Hafiz, you've been waiting a long time. I want to come to you, please. This is also a company movement. We've talked to Alex about Milaha signing a partnership contract. We saw news in mid-May that Saudi Aramco, Siemens Energy, and the World Economic Forum launched a co-lead report titled Cyber Resilience in the Oil and Gas Industry Playbook. Hafiz, why does an industry-specific playbook like this hold such importance in the world right now, given new levels of cyber attacks and COVID-19's impact?
Okay, thanks for the question. In my point of view, this playbook you're talking about, which is made by Aramco, and Siemens Energy, this playbook actually in line with the World Economic Forum principles for cyber resilience. They have issued a generic, principle. They are actually 10 principles which they recommend every business around the world should actually follow. And we in oil and gas energy sector, we believe that we have specific key requirements. That is why we thought that it's better to have a playbook which will be very specific to oil and gas. And that's why the playbook which we are talking about, this playbook actually has 6 principles. And most of them are very, very critical for the oil and gas infrastructures. It's too difficult to cover all of them here in this discussion, but I will like to highlight at least 2 of them. If you read that report, the one key principle which is mentioned there is the resilience by design. And by design, I mean that, a company like Saudi Aramco, we have a massive infrastructure. It's very difficult to ensure security after things are done. So whenever you do a new project, you need to make sure that whenever you install a new infrastructure, new refinery, new OT infrastructure, new IT organization you're making, any new project you're going, you need to make sure that the security is in the design. The developers, for example, they should know the responsibilities. They should know the threat they are facing. So we need to make sure that we inculcate the security at the initial phase of any project done in the oil and gas sector. That's why this particular playbook is highlighting the resilience by design. If you try to bring in security at the later stage, for example, you bring in the security guys, they do pen testing, they do red teaming on your infrastructures. It's too late because the thing is already deployed. It's very difficult to later on redesign the architecture. Sometimes a company like Aramco has a massive infrastructure. The application they use, for example, this is scattered around the globe, and changing this architecture later on becomes very difficult. So that is why Aramco is forcing upon the resilience by design, making sure that everything we conceive, everything we deploy, the security should be there in the design. And especially for a smaller company, it's relatively easier. But for a bigger company like Saudi Aramco, it becomes even a bigger challenge. That's why we wanted to highlight this one key principle. The second key principle, which is highlighted in this playbook, is the corporate responsibility. A company like Saudi Aramco, which is, we're talking about more than 65,000 employees. When you talk about OT infrastructure, we have millions of OT devices. Same as with the IT infrastructure. So whenever we talk about the responsibility of cybersecurity, it's very difficult to make small organization within a company like Aramco and we tell them this is your responsibility to secure it. It's very difficult. So it is actually a corporate responsibility. So every employee within the company should understand the criticality of cybersecurity. They should understand, they should be educated, they should improve their behavior in terms of cybersecurity, and everybody should take on the responsibility. This corporate responsibility also highlights the financial aspect. Most of the companies, cybersecurity is an extra burden in terms of financial overheads. The key management and the key guys within the company, they are very reluctant sometimes in allocating money to the cybersecurity. So you will have to allocate resources for cybersecurity. I know it's a burden in most of the businesses, but the larger organization like Saudi Aramco, they fully understand this. The financial aspect has to be looked after. One more aspect in terms of the corporate responsibility is the organizational restructuring. Small organization, it's very easy. You build a team of 10 people doing cybersecurity for your organization, the jobs get done, But when you talk about a company like Aramco, you have to think about it, because sometimes you make a new vice president within the company who is looking after the cybersecurity. It's not only the CISO's job, so you need to build a complete workforce who is actually looking after cybersecurity, or you make decentralized cybersecurity organization where your small business lines are looking after this. Anyway, so these are the two areas I wanted to highlight, and we have 4 other principles which we highlighted in that playbook. But these are probably the most critical ones.
Okay, brilliant, Hafiz. Thank you so much. And again, what we've heard is shared responsibility and just having a framework across multi-stakeholder partnerships, which Noel, you mentioned at the beginning. We're running out of time, which is always sad because there's so much more to talk about. There is one question that I did have for everyone, which unfortunately we can't do. We could do it on LinkedIn maybe, so that could be a platform. But I want to do rapid fire before we go. And I promise this, I think everyone's going to have fun with this. So don't think, just one word, whatever comes to your mind. And we start now before we conclude. Oz, cloud. You can all unmute yourselves, please, for this to work.
Sorry, yeah, cloud. Future.
Noel, breach.
Response.
Mounir, firewall.
Expired.
Alex, malware.
You need a doctor.
Hafiz, ransomware.
It's a major threat.
Major threat. Okay. Now that Bhavna's back on the screen, it means we're almost over with our rapid fire. I just want to say thank you very much to all our esteemed panelists. We started out this session asking about a one word that would describe ourselves. Oz was growth-minded. Noel, resourceful. Mounir, passionate. Alex, the thinker. And Hafiz definitely was certain about being a COVID-19 for cyber attacks. And I wrapped up by saying we're courageous. So I think pretty much that sets the tone for what cybersecurity strategies look like and the people behind the scenes. I want to thank our esteemed panelists for having so much of fun with you this morning. It was a great conversation. Everyone watching, thank you so much for reaching out to us. You can find us on LinkedIn. Connect with us there or email me naz@nazconsulting.co.za or naz@sociallyacceptable.co.za, and I'll catch you later this afternoon. Thanks, Bhavna. Back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Firstly, I have to say,
Thank you.
precious energy right there from Nazreen, whom we rightly call Naz. So Naz, thank you so much on that. And a big, big thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for joining us.